Well, here we have one of the so-called baby Cadillacs of the 1980s. This is the 1986 to 91 Seville. This is in particular a 1988 to 89 model. I can tell it because it's got a 4.5 liter V8 badge on the back. It doesn't say 4.5 liter port fuel injection, which was 1990, or 4.9 liter engine, which would have been 1991. These cars came with a 4.1 liter V8 from 1985 to 87. Now, this vehicle, as I mentioned, superseded the 1980 to 85 Bustleback and was a wholly different design for Cadillac, much more compact on a 108-inch wheelbase versus the previous 114-inch wheelbase. But the car lost basically a foot in length and also went down to 3,400 pounds from about 3,800 pounds. And if you haven't yet watched it, check out my video with then Cadillac Assistant Chief Designer John Manoogian, where he shares some of his sketches for this vehicle and thoughts. At the bottom of this car, you can see these ribs. They're stamped in the sheet metal. That was done to pay homage to Mercedes, or kind of copied the Mercedes style of the era. And Pontiac did the same on the 1985 N cars and later continued that theme into what I'll call its guardrail styling in the 90s. This Seville had a dramatically different proportion, but it had some Cadillac features like that proud of the hood that I just pointed out, kind of that rooftop hood in the middle. But aside from that, this is such a dramatic departure from what Cadillac was doing before. Notice the round wheel arches versus the square wheel arches. And even on the inside, it was pretty compact in spite of it being widened by 3 to 4 inches at the last minute so that the 4.1 liter V8 could be accommodated under hood. This car was originally going to have the Buick V6. And it's got a cool cup holder there. You rotate that wheel, and it goes from being closed to being a coin holder to being a cup holder. Notice the seat backs are also very thin. This Cadillac was trying to get more interior roominess in this vehicle. Did have its own dashboard that it shared with the Eldorado, but different from the DeVille. And, those thin seat backs do give it some decent room in the rear, but this car is very compact in overall dimensions. And it's amazing they did those thin seat backs, but they have these big pouches on the back that intrude on the rear seat space yet again. So this was a radically different Cadillac, as I mentioned, from the Bustleback. Clearly very different. It does have the horizontal taillights, which was a Seville thing all the way from the start. Those wraparound block-style taillights that the 76 to 9 had. But very different proportions from what Cadillac was used to. And this was not what the designers wanted for a Seville. This was forced upon them by corporate planners who, when this vehicle was being planned, thought that gas was going to be $5 to $6 a gallon. And the big boat Cadillacs at the time, planners thought just had this association to them, much like the Hummers would in later years. And Cadillac was trying to reinvent its image as being more youthful and more upscale and affluent than what the old rear-wheel drive Cadillacs were attracting for buyers. Now, one could say they went too far with this Seville, just being as small as it was. I do think, however, it remains an attractive car, in part because the wheels, you notice, are pretty far out to the corners. They're not tucked in on the body, where, as John would say, it looks like a hippo on a bar stool. It's actually got pretty good proportions, and the two-tone on this car looks quite nice as well. It does have the door-into-roof design that was done on the DeVille series, and a rather tight interior with some unique features like that cup holder, coin holder thing that I just showed. Now, unfortunately, I think the compact dimensions really hurt the Seville, as in 1985, the outgoing Bustleback Seville sold almost 40,000 units. When this vehicle was introduced in 1986, it sold just 19,000 units. As time progressed into 1987, 88, 89, and 90, and 91, the sales did pick up a little bit on the vehicle, to the point where in 1990 it had its best year, selling 33,000 units. But it still was not topping what the previous generation sold, and the Eldorado was an even bigger flop, the redone Eldorado for 1986, which sold about 20,000 units compared to the previous generation's 76,000 units in 1985. Again, you have to remember that when these cars were planned, it was thought that gas was going to be $5 to $6 per gallon back in 1980s dollars. It obviously ended up the exact opposite of that and was dirt cheap almost by the time that these vehicles came out. And Cadillac was trying to distance itself from the stigma that it had of selling lumbering, big, gas-guzzling vehicles. And this was how they thought that they could do it and hopefully pick up new buyers along the way. Unfortunately, it was just too dramatic of a pivot in too short a period of time. And I think maybe some of the original downsizing of the 79 Eldorado as an example, and the success Cadillac had with it, fooled them into thinking that they could repeat that again, downsizing the vehicle and having some additional sales success, when in fact it clearly didn't work in this generation. Nonetheless, this 1986 to 91 Seville remains kind of an interesting Cadillac. It has some Cadillac cues, like I was saying, the prow on the hood, but it's very clean body sides and doesn't have the vertical taillight signature that many Cadillacs have. Also doesn't have the large fender peaks. So it represents a really interesting departure of Cadillac styling from the past and a bridge to the future. And clearly the 1992 Seville, when that came out, would be a whole nother ball game and a relative sales success too at the time. That car kind of put Cadillac back on the map, although it still really didn't hit a home run from a sales perspective. That 92 Seville sold 44,000 units in its first year of production. And I have to say, I've driven the Sevilles of this vintage, and I actually think they drive quite nicely, particularly the 1991 models, where they got the 200 horsepower, 4.9-liter V8 engine, very torquey engine, peppy. They did come out with a really nice-looking Seville STS that gave the car a little bit different look, put the badge in the center of the grille, a bit more European flair, some nice tri-tip exhausts on it as well. Those really are my favorite. And like I said, they drive quite nice, and they do have real wood on the interior as well, which was a rarity for American cars during that period. And that real wood would also continue on into the 1992 Seville, and they'd even go even more extreme in 1992 with the leather seats in the car being full leather seats all the way around, not just leather seating areas, really trying to compete with Lexus, who by then had entered on the scene and had really set not just the Americans, but the Germans back and aghast with the offerings that they had on the LS400 at the price points that they were offering. In any case, hope you enjoyed this brief segment on the 1986 to 91 Seville. Be sure to check out the interview with then Cadillac Assistant Chief Designer and later Cadillac Chief Exterior Studio Designer, John Manoogian. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care. Thanks again for watching this video on the 86 to 91 Seville. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some further suggestions for you. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do so by clicking the circular icon of the 67 Buick Riviera at the top left. Thanks again for watching.